today we're going to be talking about barking dogs, serial barkers. There's a lot of different ways that we can go about barking dogs. The biggest thing that I would say is first we would need to categorize the bark, because there's a lot of different reasons why a dog might be barking, and there's a lot of reasons why we might want a dog to bark, so whenever we're looking at certain behaviors, it's not necessarily that the behavior is good or bad. It's more of, all right, what do we want? Like, what fits our lifestyle? What are we training for? Stuff like that. That's the framework that we should be thinking in. So when it comes to barking, we need to determine, what kind of bark it is and why they're barking. If a dog is barking excessively and it's very high pitched, kind of like something like that, and it goes on and on, like they don't stop, right? That's more of coming from a more like fearful perspective, right? So the dog might be a little bit more uncertain as to what's going on. Like, for example, like my dog, like if he hears somebody at the door and it's not really familiar to him, right? He might do like one bark, like right? So something like that, I wouldn't correct. Like, I want that. He's doing it in a way where he's informing whoever is around that, there's dogs present, but he's not doing it in a way where he's uncertain, and if I tell him to stop at any time, he'll stop. Another type is a bark that's kind of like, ruh, 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 ruh. Ruh, 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 ruh. Ruh, 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 ruh. So that's sort of like that, more of like a territorial bark. But the most common, I would say, would probably be the first bark, where the dog is really kind of like uncertain and a little bit fearful and hears a certain sound and starts barking, rah, 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 like runs up to the door, starts barking, rah, 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 something like that. And that's the bark that we're going to be talking about today. So when you're dealing with something like that, where the dog hears something, maybe like a door knock or, sounds like outside on the street, whatever the case may be, maybe another dog barking. If you're in an apartment, maybe like they hear a dog in the hallway, and they just start barking, bah, 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 so there's a few things. One, I would say, get a crate. I honestly believe that every dog deserves their own space, deserves their own crate. But I know that a lot of you guys a lot of you probably may not feel very inclined to get a crate for your dogs. So if that's the case, fine. If you have a dog bed, you can kind of use it in the same way. It'll take a little bit more discipline on your part if you don't use a crate, but the main thing is if the dog, right, moves towards the door or something like that, right? If you're in the house, and look, okay, so like if your dog is in the house, right? I mean, if you're in the house and the dog hears a sound and they start barking, they shouldn't be moving towards like the door, for instance. So if that happens and the dog is excessively barking and not stopping, the first thing you can do is put a leash on the dog and guide the dog to, for example, a dog bed or a crate, right? So that would be the first step, using the leash to show the dog where the dog should be. First of all, the dog might still be kind of like attentive towards wherever the sound is coming from, but they might be like, you get them to be, on their dog bed, sitting down, just physically first. They shouldn't be moving towards the trigger at this time, right? You want to just keep them calm. If you're outside, for example, or like, I want to get into the exposure part, but I feel like getting into like the exposure part is going to be a little bit too long for this one single video. Also add food to this exercise, or alternatively use food instead. But the thing is, you really want to have a leash, especially if your dog has already built a strong habit of, running to the door, for example, or running to the window, whatever the case may be, and just like barking excessively. So you want to use the leash to show the dog that there's nothing wrong. And so you need to be very calm when you are leashing up your dog and bringing them to the dog bed or the crate, or even like the couch. Like, it doesn't really matter where you bring them, but you should take them to like a quote unquote safe space that's within your house, and let them be comfortable there. So if they will take food, right, what you can do is you can use food to call them back to you. So they might hear a sound, they might start barking a lot, row, 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 row. And then you can call them. You can call their name, for example, not in a way where you're reprimanding them. Like, you're not yelling at them. You can call, that is one way, but what I'm saying is if you're gonna use food, right, call their name, and when they come to you, give them a piece of food, right? So they might be barking, row, row, row. Call their name. They'll come to you. They should be coming to you, and then you give them a piece of food, right? So if you find that within like the first or second rep that they're taking the food and they're going right back to barking, then we need to put a leash on the dog, right? We need to show them what we want them to do. Now, what was I gonna say? So, okay, so like, let's say you don't want to use their name, right? Like, let's say you don't want to call them to you, right? You just want them to stop, right? So in that instance, you would also ideally have a leash on them, but if not, right, you would want to use a sound that you want it to mean no, or like your verbal correction, right? And you want to use that sound, very firmly. And if they're not responding, you want to get up, right, and use your body language to like move them away from the trigger and just have them back down and settle down. So if you are consistent with using that verbal correction and then having them settle down, and then once they settle down, you can leave, right? And then you might have to do that, for a couple reps, but they will get it. And your verbal correction will start to mean more and more. So you won't have to maybe like get up and approach them directly anymore. They'll start understanding that your verbal correction, that sound, whichever one that you choose, to say no or hey or stop, or your verbal correction, like they're gonna start to understand. So the main thing is addressing it, right? Like, we don't really want to not do anything with that type of bark, right? With the second type of bark that I mentioned, where it's very just boom, like one single bark, and it's just kind of like boom, one and then pause, and then one and then pause. That's, to me, that's okay. If you want to stop that, you can address that as well. Again, it's your own lifestyle that you want to create with your dog, but in general, I would say like the more frantic and uncertain barks are the ones that you need to address, because you don't want to keep your dog in a state of uncertainty, right? Like in a state of anxiety or fear, right? So you want to address it immediately, and you want to let them know. You have to show them. So the best way is with the leash, right? You want to show them, what you want them to do. So for example, you can take them to your dog bed. So if they start barking, take them to the dog bed and just keep them there. They might still be barking a little bit, but physically what they're doing is the most important thing. So you want to first start by keeping them still, right? And then eventually, I'm going to make more videos, but like eventually you're going to start having them remain calm while those sounds are going on. And they're going to understand, okay, if I just stay here and relax, it's all good. Anyways, follow for dog training videos and tips, and I'll see you later.